Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming and welcome. My name is Isabel Molina. I am the public programs producer here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the museum, both in person and virtually, for today's musical performance by the Manhattan Chamber Players in honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Here at the museum, we are dedicated to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and anti-Semitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. An equally important part of this mission, the museum shares the history of the Holocaust by centering the individual stories and experiences of survivors, while at the same time educating current and future generations so that they can stand up for what is right. To help us commemorate all those who perished in the Holocaust and celebrate the resilience of Jewish music and culture, we are honored to be joined today by the Manhattan Chamber Players. The Manhattan Chamber Players are a chamber music collective of New York-based musicians who share the common aim of performing the greatest works in the chamber repertoire at the highest level. Formed in 2015 by artistic director and violinist Luke Fleming, Manhattan Chamber Players is comprised of an impressive roster of musicians who all come from the tradition of great music making. If you would like to learn more about the Manhattan Chamber Players, we have a sign-up list for their mailing list outside at the visitor services desk, as well as some CDs that you're welcome to sign up for. Before we begin, I would like to thank the Battery Park City Authority for their support in helping to make this program possible. I would also like to thank the Forward for co-presenting this program with us. And now I would just like to take a moment to ask everyone to please silence their cell phones and anything else you have that may make noise. The concert will be just under 90 minutes with a brief 10-minute pause about 3/4 of the way through. Thank you all again for joining us. We hope you enjoy, and I will hand things over to Luke Fleming from the Manhattan Chamber Players.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you to all of you for joining us today for this very special concert on this very special day. As Isabel said, I'm the artistic director and violist of the Manhattan Chamber Players, and be performing you today alongside my colleagues. Normally, I don't talk at the top of a show. I like to come out swinging, come out and play some music right away, but because of the unique subject matter for today's program and also some choices that we made for the programming, I thought it'd be good to just go ahead and talk at the top of the show, particularly because we are beginning today's program with the composer Richard Strauss. And I imagine some of you, at least in the audience, have been around long enough to remember when performing Richard Strauss's music at an event such as this would be unthinkable. Really, until the 1970s, his music was not performed in Israel, and again, in an event like this, it would not be something you would think of. Much the same with Wagner's music, but the reason for this is that Richard Strauss he was a German composer, of course. He remained in Germany during World War II and was long thought to be a Nazi sympathizer, what have you. And we learned a lot more about what went on during World War II and what Strauss did and said and wrote throughout time, and it's become a lot more widely known. Strauss was incredibly critical of the Nazi regime, never officially joined the Nazi Party, and what he actually did was use the very high position he had attained in the musical world of Germany at the time to help family members, friends, and friends of friends and friends of family to escape Nazi Germany, and even managed to save some lives of people who were interred in concentration camps and prisons, again through his influence. He was eventually fired by the Nazi Party from his position because of his correspondence with with Jews, which of course wasn't allowed. And he remained extremely critical of Nazi Germany until his death. He actually even at one point drove to the Terezin concentration camp to lobby for the release of prisoners, including some of his own family members. In that particular case, he was unsuccessful. But all that being said, Strauss, at the end of his life, when he wrote his amazing magnum opus in 1948, Metamorphosen, said that it was this beautifully tragic piece was meant to represent the destruction of hundreds of years of German culture by murderers and rapists and barbarians. That's how he felt about what went on during World War II. And the piece that we'll play today is the sextet from Capriccio. It actually is a piece that, if you see the opera Capriccio, which is not performed very often, it opens the entire opera. You have a sextet from the orchestra on stage perform this work of just immense beauty and, in many ways, simplicity. And the idea of the piece in the context of the opera is there's a contest between a poet and a musician to show the woman that they desire that either music or poetry is the ultimate expression of art. And it begins with the sextet, and this is the piece that the musician has written to show this. So the whole idea of the piece is to show how beautiful music can be. The opera was written in 1941 at a time where generally in Germany, nobody wanted to hear a piece of music that was all about beauty and subtlety. And so the opera was not very well received at the time, but it is really one of the most beautiful pieces I think ever written. And that's how we'll open the program. The next two pieces on the program before the intermission are written by Jewish composers who were murdered in the Holocaust. The first by, well, both are fairly lesser known composers. They both were Czech Jews. Erwin Schulhoff was a Moravian Jew, and Gideon Klein was an Ashkenazi Jew. I'm sorry, I reversed that. Schulhoff was a Ashkenazi Jew, and Gideon Klein was Moravian. The piece by Schulhoff was written in the 1920s, long before he was, obviously before World War II or the Holocaust. It was written as he was becoming more and more famous. The work does have a very youthful quality. You'll hear a lot of interesting extended techniques with pizzicatos and ricochet strokes. He was very adept at writing this music that was very idiomatic for a virtuoso string player. Great piece of music. Schulhoff, he was, just to tell his story a little bit, because he's not a very well-known composer, in World War II, he initially, living in Prague, was writing under a pseudonym so he wouldn't be discovered, and then eventually applied for Russian asylum. And just after he did that, but before he could get to Russia, he was apprehended and wound up dying in a prison, not a concentration camp, but a prison camp in 1942. And then Gideon Klein, contrastingly, the piece that he composed, the string trio on today's program, was written while he was interred at a Terezin concentration camp. And he and a number of musicians that were interred there gave concerts in secret. And given the situation they were in, it's rather surprising that much of the work in the outer movements especially is very light, and but one imagines that in a situation like that, some light entertainment would have been most welcome. The second movement is a theme and variations that's based on a Moravian theme. He was a Moravian Jew, but the music itself is far darker in general and filled with pathos, and I think that's where you really hear the situation that he was in. He died 2 years later in Auschwitz. And finally, after we have a brief intermission, we'll play the Verklärte Nacht by Arnold Schönberg, written right at the turn of the century, so long before World War II or the Holocaust. But the reason we've included it is that, remember that quote from Strauss about the destruction of centuries of German culture? Well, It's often said of Schönberg, who's largely known for really moving music forward from tonality to atonality. And a lot of his music is somewhat inscrutable because it's so dissonant and so atonal. But before he did that, he really took tonality about as far as it could be taken. And many would say that German Romanticism as far as it could be taken. Verklärte Nacht is the piece that is often used as a demarcation line. It stretches the bounds of tonality, but it still is just so lush and so beautiful. A little about Schönberg. He is an Austrian Jew. He converted to Protestantism right around the turn of the century, right around the time Verklärte Nacht was written, but then in the 1930s, with growing anti-Semitism, he went back to the Jewish faith and remained a Jewish activist until his death in 1951. At that point, he was in France, so he was out of danger. Verklärte Nacht, without getting into too much detail, is based on an expressionist poem by Richard Demel. The poem itself is, well, it's really in two parts. And the first part is about a couple walking in a dark woods with gnarled trees, imagine like an expressionist painting. And it's all about the fear and dread of a woman saying to her lover that she's pregnant with the child of another man. And then finally she says this to him and admits her sin in her mind. And then the second part of the piece, suddenly the music goes from being this really gnarly, dissonant music to being the most beautiful, tonal and lush music, and it represents the man saying to her, basically, it's okay, and the child will be loved, and look where we are in nature, the beauty of the world, how could anything be wrong? And that's how we'll conclude our program today, with this amazing cornerstone of romantic composition by Schönberg. And thank you for letting me explain the program to you. I hope it helps you appreciate the music on it a bit more, and it's certainly one we've been very moved by to put together for you today. Thank you for being with us, and we hope you enjoy the program.